Good afternoon. My name is Andrea Babun, and today I will be presenting ADHD. What is ADHD? ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. It is a medical condition and a genetic disorder. A person with ADHD has differences in brain development. ADHD can affect a child at school, at home, and in friendships. Criteria for ADHD. Each child may experience different symptoms. The three most common categories of symptoms of ADHD include inattention, impulsivity, and hyperactivity. Some may have all of them, or some may have two or only one category of symptoms. They do not need to have all of them to be diagnosed with ADHD. Some main requirements are children up to 16 years old need to have 6 or more symptoms. 17-year-old and adults need to have 5 or more symptoms. These symptoms need to be present for at least 6 months, and they need to be inappropriate for the development level of the person. Symptoms for inattention. Often fails to give close attention to details. Often does not seem to listen when spoken to directly. Often does not follow through on instructions. Has trouble organizing tasks. Avoids to do tasks that require mental effort over a long time, like homework. Often loses things necessary for tasks and activities, like pencils, pens, erasers, or even telephones. That person is often easily distracted. Symptoms for impulsivity. Often interrupts others. Has difficulty waiting for their turn in school and/or social games. They tend to be impulsive and act too quickly before thinking, meaning they may do things without asking permission. They may have emotional reactions that seem too intense for the situations, like doing bad choices out of anger or any other emotion. Symptoms for hyperactivity. That person seems to be in constant motion. For example, runs or climbs, at times where they're not supposed to. Has difficulty remaining in their seat even though it is expected. Fidgets with hands or screams when in their seat. Talks excessively, has trouble staying still or staying quiet when needed, meaning it is difficult for them to engage in quiet activities. Loses or forgets things repeatedly and often. Inability to stay on task, meaning they shift from one task to another. They are restless and easily bored. DSM Nomenclature. DSM stands for Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Is a product of more than 10 years of effort by hundreds of international experts in all aspects of mental health. The changing nomenclature from subtypes in DSM-5 reflects increasing evidence that symptoms are often fluid within individuals across their lifespan rather than stable traits. Different types of ADHD. The 3 major subtypes of ADHD include combined type, which is most common ADHD, is characterized by impulsive and hyperactive behaviors as well as inattention. Second, we have impulsive and hyperactive type. This type of ADHD is characterized by impulsive and hyperactive behaviors without inattention. Third, inattentive type. This type of ADHD is characterized by inattention without hyperactivity. In the graph to the right, we can see that combined and hyperactive impulsive types are the ones that are most common. How is ADHD treated? And a specific treatment for ADHD will be determined by the doctor based on your child's age, overall health, and medical history. Also, the extent of your child's symptoms, your child's tolerance for specific medication or therapy, expectations for the course of the condition, and your opinion or preference. The main medication used to treat ADHD are stimulants and non-stimulants. Sometimes they use antidepressants. Stimulants are the most common treatment in children and teens. This is usually the type of medication a doctor recommends first. Treatments may include psychostimulant medications, which are used to balance chemicals in the brain that prohibit the child from maintaining attention and controlling impulses. Medications are commonly used to treat ADHD are below. In this chart, we can read that stimulants and non-stimulants have the same purpose. Stimulants takes effects into 30 minutes to 90 minutes. Non-stimulants takes 2 to 4 weeks. Stimulants have 2 side effects and non-stimulants has a lot of side effects. And that's why doctors recommend taking stimulants first to see if they work. Another treatment is psychosocial treatments, which is a training class for behavior management skill for parents. These behavior management skills may include reward systems, contingent attention, helps parents to treat their kids with the right response towards their actions. Teachers may also be taught behavior management skills to use in the classroom setting. Behavior management skill techniques tend to improve targeted behaviors such as completing schoolwork or keeping the child's hands to him or herself. They are not usually helpful in reducing overall inattention, hyperactivity, or impulsivity. What causes ADHD? ADHD is mostly inherited by genetics. Many kids who have ADHD have a parent or relative with it. Another reason is fetal exposure to smoking, alcohol, and drugs. Another one is premature delivery and low birth weight. Also traumatic brain injury and environmental exposures, which are toxins such as lead and found mainly in paint and pipes in older buildings. As we can see, ADHD is not caused by too much screen time, poor parenting, or eating too much sugar. ADHD can improve when kids get treatment, eat healthy food, get enough sleep, and exercise, and also have supportive parents who know how to respond to ADHD. Studies suggest that ADHD comes from a chemical imbalance or problem with the way certain neurotransmitters work in the brain. Overall, the most known reason that people get ADHD is by genetics. How does ADHD affect the brain? ADHD is a brain disorder. Parts of the frontal lobe may mature a few years later in people with ADHD. The brain is made up of nerve cells called neurotransmitters that transmit signals to the brain. Signals travel through the brain in groups of nerve cells called networks. Several major networks work differently in people with ADHD. To the right, we can see the purpose of each part of the brain. The frontal lobe, which is affected, is for planning, organizing, emotional behavior control, personality, problem solving, attention, social skills, and flexible thinking and conscious movement. The frontal lobe takes longer to mature in years than other people, and that's why people struggle with ADHD. ADHD brain structure. Neurotransmitters are chemicals that help to transmit signals from one nerve cell to the next throughout the networks in the brain. There's an example of that on top. Dopamine and norepinephrine are 2 neurotransmitters that may play a role in ADHD. The neurotransmitter dopamine is implicated as the main mediator of the brain reinforcement signal. Scientists show that there are differences in the brain size, network, neurotransmitters, and brain development of children with ADHD. They do not fully understand how this difference leads to the cause and the symptoms of ADHD. Treatments for ADHD work in part by altering the levels of neurotransmitters and changing how the network functions. To the top right, we have a picture of a normal brain and an ADHD brain. And in the bottom, it explains that low is normal and then high, which high is red. So ADHD is on red on the frontal lobe. So what the pills do is alternate the levels of neurotransmitters and change how the networks function. Personal discussion. The reason I picked this topic is because I think more people need to understand how serious ADHD is. It is not easy for them, and it's a medical condition. I have seen a lot of teachers with kids that have it, and they do not deal with it correctly. They think that they do it as an excuse to not pay attention, but the truth is that it is hard for them to focus due to it being a medical condition. And therefore, I think they need to have more patience when it comes to helping them. And more people should try to understand them. The only controversy I found was when it came to which was the most common type of ADHD. Most had that combination was the most common, but some had the hyperactive and impulsivity was the most common category of ADHD. This topic relates to my career because the reason I want to be a doctor is to be able to help people. And in order to help them, I need to understand their struggle. Overall, I love doing this project because I learned many things about ADHD that can help me in the future. Here are my citations, and I hope you enjoyed my project.